Welcome to the Underhand. Welcome to your doom.
Hello, welcome to a Necromunda terrain video. So today we're going to be taking a little look at some of the poster designs that I create for world building and Necromunda terrain. So when creating your own terrain, it can be really cool to try and embellish details on it, to try and bring out character, or to try and well build and I give an idea that people actually live and populate this particular area. So I create a lot of different designs, either using full digital tools to create like a more crisp finished design, or for people that like their painting and their world to be a little bit more painterly and expressive, I do these designs just with pen and ink. So we have a little bit of variety there for different people's tastes. They can be intermixed though, to be honest. Like you know, I like the idea that you're going to have some people that just want to write "screw you" on a sign in pen, put it up outside their house, you know, ward off the ruffians, you know, and then local gangers create their own affiliated designs for their different house allegiances, or some mid-tier hive company trying to shill their wares produces a slightly more like polished design, but you know, nothing's particularly out of the realm of possibility for someone with a limited budget or equipment to achieve. And then, you know, these can be selected in either haphazardly, to be honest, when you're doing like kind of throw-ups like you'd see, say, in a area of a town where you'd get like a lot of nightclubs and things like that. You'd often just get flyers galore for different gigs, and people just stick a tag in and stuff like that alongside, you know, the main billboard advertising of, say, like fast food or cigarettes or something like that, to something a little bit more specific where, you know, you've got a cafe or a bar and they've got up a few bits of advertising for, say, your big name brands to draw in and, you know, give their venue a little bit more colour. So, you know, we can do similar things here. So, for instance, here with this little prefab shack made out of a container crate, the vendor has added up a few different brands that he sells on premises to just add a little bit of authority to the fact that he's not just shoveling utter tripe and feces down the throats of his patrons, even though it's probably likely that, you know, he cuts everything with a little bit of sump sludge. That's the kind of thing that we're going to look at. And with that said, to be honest, a lot of people are probably like looking at this kind of thing and just thinking, is that literally just printer paper? And you'd be right, it's literally just paper. So it's surprisingly resistant to damage. So the way we do this is, once we've just printed it out from your normal kind of desktop, be that inkjet or laser printer. If it is an inkjet, you want to give it a decent amount of time to dry. You know, preferably a couple of hours, but at least let it touch dry. Then you're going to cut out the designs that you particularly want to select for your given area, and then you want to mix yourself up a little bit of PVA glue, you know, kind of Mod Podge, Elmer's glue, school glue, whatever you kind of call it in your particular area of the hive, and then just mix it up with a little bit of water. We don't want it particularly runny, because we don't really want to oversaturate the posters and damage the ink, but we do want to soften them enough so that they deform. You know, a lot of the time when you're trying to build these things up, there is actually quite significant surface details, because with GW kits or just with your own kit bashing and that, you kind of find that there is going to be a lot of details you want to include. Once they've softened, we can like layer them up nicely and they'll just conform to the terrain, and we could do things like tear and bend them up and crease them to give them a little bit more of a look of being weathered. And yeah, just with that PVA, you know, you get a really hard finish. But one of the things that I like to do, I think it makes the colours pop a little bit more, and gives that final kind of hardness to them, as I do like to finish them once they've dried fully, just with a little bit of matte varnish, and I actually just use like a brush on GW varnish for that. but you could spray a varnish the whole piece when you're done, if that's the kind of thing you prefer, and you've got the balls of steel to not completely cloud the whole thing with too much spray or humidity. There is one more step that will help to really tie them into your particular piece of terrain. So on this container crate, for instance, we've got quite a lot of build-up of rust where the water's like run down over the top and pooled, and as that's pooled and run down, we've got some like different drips of like rust stains and things like that, from like dark browns to bright oranges, and that obviously has stained the posters. Now on the designs themselves, I do try to include a certain amount of just like weathering, so for people that aren't confident or just want it to be nice and quick, there is a certain amount included in the designs to just kind of cover those bases. You know, and it just kind of adds a little layer of detail that you might not be able to do with a fat brush, but to kind of really tie them into the terrain, I think it is a good idea to, before you do varnish them, or to be honest, it probably can be done afterwards, but you might as well do it beforehand. It's just to go in and just stain certain areas with some of the colours that you've been using on that piece of terrain. Particularly, sometimes you'll find that you get quite a hard white edge where you've cut them, and that can be particularly disorientating in certain scenarios, like here on this little open sign, little billboard. I didn't really like the idea that you'd be able to see where the paper edge was. I wanted it to appear as just like one homogeneous piece. So I paid careful odds to just kind of colour all of the edge in, and then weather all of that edge nicely in and streak it down, and that just gives it a little bit of extra depth alongside the printed weathering, a little bit stronger as well in colour. You know, then once that's done, then that is when you varnish it. You know, getting ahead of myself already. One thing you might have noticed on these as well, we've actually got some other papercraft here, some little cardboard boxes. So when you are downloading the designs that I've done, I do actually have a little set that you can do little boxes with. So you got different labels for your boxes. I try and scale a lot of this stuff to be as helpful as possible. So these like small labels will actually fit on the standard GW plastic boxes in the different spaces. And the same with the hazard signs. The smaller hazard signs are scaled to the same size as these, so you can include them. And the tape is the same length as all the different fascias on these different box designs. If you want to like outline the edges of all your boxes with hazard tape, otherwise you can just use like the longer strips, and you can just go like over the top of the box as if it was just taped down with hazard tape for its particular contents. Like here we've got some incendiary missiles, you know, packed very, very carefully by the Astra Militarum into this hardy cardboard box. But you know, make sure you've got a high explosive sign on there, it's all good. I won't cover the boxes too much though, because I'm actually probably going to pick them back up in another video and just show you the construction and a few tips and tricks on how to make something out of paper like this and actually make it useful to you on the tabletop, where, you know, in all likelihood it's going to get mistreated, and you don't want it just to kind of crumple and be pathetic and a waste of your time. I think that gives us a pretty good overview of the procedure to go through to get these onto your terrain and get them out there. But now what we'll do is I'll actually show you like physically doing it. Right, let's get some posters down, shall we? Cool, so I've got some PVA here. We'll pop a little bit of that in the tub. We only want a tiny amount. We'll try and measure that out. No, it's too much. Of course it is. Right, let's dilute that down with a little bit of water. So if you've got a pipette, you could just add a small amount of water. I'm just going to use a straw here by putting my finger on the end and dropping a little bit in. That should dilute that down nicely. We don't want the mixture to be too runny. We just want it to soften the paper but be controllable and still be quite viscous to stick those posters on nicely. First one, we've got a little set of dual barricades made out of a couple of doors from the original Necromunda 2017 release. We're going to use that as like a little checkpoint, so let's grab a couple of our kind of handwritten signs and see if we can pick out a couple that'll be ideal for that. Alright, let's have a little look here. Okay, so yeah, actually, let's go with a little minefield sign and a little toll booth sign. Yeah, that should create a nice little idea of a checkpoint. And it'll sit nicely in your game, so you can size that up now, see what will fit on there, and then cut those ones out. Alright, let's cut those three. That's one, and that's two. That should do it. Right, let's get our glue back, and we can dry fit these guys and then stick them on. So let's see, some quite raised details there, but I don't think it should matter. Once these have softened from the glue mixture, they'll conform really nicely. Right, so we'll just brush on a little bit of the PVA mixture onto the back here, and then we can apply some hard pressure down on top of the poster just to get it to conform to the terrain. You want to use like a sculpting tool or the back of your nail, or something like that, to just edge it in around the hard details, and it will fold quite nicely around them, and then you can just tuck it in place, push it down, and then viscosity of the glue will hold it in place once it dries. Once it dries, the PVA will go quite plasticky, and it makes the poster really hardy. You can paint over them nicely and things like that. This is the point as well where you would like fold the corners down or tear them to show that they're starting to get old and come away, or that someone's come and vandalized them or whatever. We're going to go for quite a simple approach here, but there's no reason why you couldn't layer up the posters. We could have added some posters first that were from the door's previous lives. So with the door that's sideways, for instance, if we'd applied posters in the correct orientation for how the door was originally placed, that would give a good bit of storytelling to, that the door was originally a security office or a toilet door or something like that, and then now it's on its side. To make the barricade, the other poster is the correct orientation now for its new purpose. Alright, so with that one tucked in, we can just sit it aside, let it dry. Once it's dry, we can come back to that one and give it a bit of weathering, because I think that would look nice if we mirrored the brown patina on the doors a little bit more on those shoddy signs, to just tie them two together. We'll look at a slightly more uniform piece now. We've got some barrels here. We've got one painted dark blue, and then a couple of heavily corroded grey barrels. So in your games, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's fun to have like things like explosive barrels, things like that. And the easiest way to do that kind of thing is to kind of create up a kind of color coding for your group. And with the blue one, we're going to just have it as a stationary barrel, as an obstacle. We'll go for a water barrel. So we're going to use our in-world mortar company Recyc. So we'll just size up a couple of these Recyc banners and see which ones would fit best. I think the chunky one would probably look a little bit forced, so we'll go with a thin one, just to look like a nice little label there. Sometimes when you're cutting them out, it's difficult to see if you've done the corners, so if you flip it over, you can just catch those little edges that you've missed a little bit easier without the print getting in your way. Same process, just going to take a little bit of our PVA and just apply it to the back. With the smaller ones, it is easy to apply too much and get it on your hands or get it over the model, but don't worry too much, because we can sort that out once we've got everything positioned. So we'll get that on, get it lined up as best we can, and then just with a bit of kitchen towel, paper towel, toilet roll, whatever you've got to hand, we can just wipe away the glue from the model on our fingers. Yeah, that looks about right. Let's just clean that up and we're good to go. We can leave that one again aside, maybe come back to that one, pick some functions for the grey barrels, or add like a little label on the fire extinguisher, just something that gives it the idea that it's got text down the side of it or something like that. You can just go wild with your imagination, to be honest, just as many details as you want to or don't want to add. Right, with this set of barrels, we'll choose a hazardous purpose for them. They've lost most of their paint, or just weren't really painted, just treated metal. So what we've got here is a little bit of hazard tape. This is a really fast way of getting those stripes on. I like to paint the stripes a lot of the time, but it is a more finicky process. It is time consuming, so you can just use these little pre-printed bits of tape to just kind of speed that up for you, and I've got quite a few of those on the different poster designs. Again, a bit of PVA glue, whack it on, and that should adhere that nicely to the poster. Now, I did measure up, or eye up, shall I say, this a second ago, but turns out I failed miserably, and it doesn't fit. But you know what they say, cock up is the mother of invention, or something like that, so we should be able to sort it out. If you do think, oh bollocks, I've just messed that up, don't worry, you know, just work with it. End of the day, it's the underhive. Most of the stuff is a bit knackered, you know. You can sort that kind of thing out on the fly, cram another poster over top of it, smash it with weathering, put some bullet holes, whatever, doesn't matter, or just ignore it. Most people won't notice. They'll be awe-inspired by the fact that, you know, they're playing Necromunda and having a good time. So with the gap, what we're going to do is we're just going to tear off the edges to just to delineate where that gap starts. Because the poster is now quite soft, the bit of tape is quite soft, we can just pull it away really easily, and then that just softens those cut hard edges and leaves a gap. Now the gap is quite large, and that can look quite weird where you've got hazard tape all the way around the edge of the barrel apart from this one space. So what we can do is we can add back in a small amount of the damaged tape into that gap to kind of show that it's come away a little bit unevenly, and then once that's all dried on, we can come back in and weather those gaps applicably. So now let's stick that last bit of tape on. Sorry guys, a bit out of shot there, but yeah, we'll get that tape in place, and again tear off any hard edges, and it looks a little bit more natural now that we've got a couple of small gaps instead of one big gap. Awesome. Right, so we'll let that dry off, and yeah, I think that looks good. We can come back and paint them in a little bit. Fast forward, and here we are, we can paint these ones. Right, so let's slop a little bit of shade on. With the posters, often you get little hard white edges, so I'm just going to slop a little bit of shade on. Yeah, kind of softens those edges and ties the poster into the background coloration of the barricade. At this point, you know, you can go further and you can have it covered in graffiti and tags and things like that. You can use microfine pens or paints to just kind of do a little bit of graffiti if you want to. But yeah, primarily I'd say just focus on just giving a little bit of weathering over the top to just to tie them in. You know, that layered approach, it helps the eye just to accept it all as one thing instead of it look quite blatantly just stuck on the outside. And we're just doing that here. So those bits of damage, I'm just going to blend two different coloured enamel rust paints together and stain a little bit of the intact tape just to tie that rust effect through. Right guys, that covers it all. At the end I'll add up some stills of my links where you can download the different posters. I'll also put those in the description, and in the next video we'll go over some of the sheets that I've put together, go over their different intended uses or the reasons I've made them and things like that. Thanks very much.
Stop.